The UAP Herald. Case File 009. The Green Circle over Sary Shagan. There is a place in the Kazakh desert, on the west bank of a lake the size of a small sea, that the Soviet Union spent 40 years pretending did not exist. No name on the map that mattered. A closed city you could not enter, and if you lived there, could not freely leave. Behind its fences, the USSR built its shield against nuclear war. The rockets meant to shoot down American warheads, and according to the rumors, something stranger: beam weapons, lasers. In the winter of 1977, a man walked out of that world and into West Germany, and the Central Intelligence Agency sat him down and asked him everything he knew: warhead sizes, unit numbers, which site checked the bombs, and which site fired the missiles. And near the end of the debrief, almost as an afterthought, he mentioned one evening he had stepped outside to get some air and seen a bright green circle open in the sky and grow rings like a stone dropped into still water in total silence. The CIA wrote it all down, stamped it confidential, and filed it. Most of the report was then blacked out for the better part of 50 years. The part that survived the censor's pen almost intact was the green circle. Tonight, a real spy document from inside the Soviet Union's most secret weapons range. What it actually says, what we can prove, and what we very carefully will not. Start with the object in your hand, because on this channel, the document is the story. What we have is 3 pages. They carry a header at the top of each sheet, and the header tells you exactly what kind of paper this is.
Directorate of Operations. This is an information report, not finally evaluated intelligence.
That line is not a disclaimer we are adding. It is printed on the page. An intelligence information report, an IIR, is raw human intelligence. It is what a source said, taken down and passed up the chain before any analyst has weighed it, checked it, or blessed it as true. It is a lead, not a conclusion. Keep that in your mind for the whole hour, because the agency itself is telling you, we are not vouching for this. We are recording it. Now the cover sheet. Report number: Foxtrot, India Romeo Kilo 311 01638-77. Date of distribution: the 26th of December, 1977. The date of information, the window the source is describing, November 1972 to November 1973. Subject: in plain type.
The Sary Shagan Weapons Testing Range.
Country: USSR. And a single field that tells you how this was gotten. Acquisition: Germany. The source is described in 6 words, and only 6, because the rest of the line is redacted.
A former Soviet citizen who served.
Served where? In what capacity? Under whose recruitment? Gone. Blacked out. This was a defector, or an émigré, debriefed in the West, the kind of human source the Cold War ran on. The classification stamp runs across the top and bottom of every page.
Confidential, warning notice. Sensitive intelligence sources and methods involved.
Sources and methods. The agency is protecting how it got this man and what channel carried his words. And then, at the very top of the cover, a newer stamp in a different ink of history.
Approved for release 2026.
That is the tell that this reached us at all. Now look at what is missing, because the holes are half the document. The pages we have are numbered. At the top, -4 and -5. Pages 1, 2, and 3 are not in the release. On the pages we do have, the numbered paragraphs run 1 through 14, and here is the pattern. Paragraphs 1 through 9 are a single black rectangle. Paragraph 12, another black rectangle. What survives in clear text is paragraph 10, 11, 13, and 14. Warheads, a rumor about lasers and a green light in the sky. Down the side of the cover runs the distribution list, the alphabet soup of who got a copy. State Department, DIA, NSA. The FBI, NPIC. The Photo Interpretation Center. A handwritten control number in the corner, 3915084. This was not a curiosity. It went to the whole national security apparatus. And notice the page numbers again. We are holding sheets 4 and 5. We are reading the tail end of a longer debrief. Pages of base geography and hardware came before and did not make the release. But what did survive went everywhere that mattered. The analysts who model Soviet forces, the photo interpreters at NPIC who would go hunting for these sites from orbit, the FBI, the code breakers at NSA. A green light in the sky does not earn that mailing list on its own. The missiles do. The light just came stapled to them. And the paper itself has a longer story than the stamp suggests. The public first saw a version of this report decades ago, heavily redacted, the UAP account left as almost the only readable thing on the page. A fuller copy came loose through a formal declassification request, filed at the end of 2019 by John Greenewald of the archive known as the Black Vault, and the fullest version, the one we are reading from, arrived in May of 2026 when the Department of War put its UAP files online under the program it calls Pursue. So the chain of custody is clean and it is public. This is a real CIA document. The only question worth asking is what it says, and how much of that we can stand behind. To read the green circle, you first have to understand where the man was standing. So what is Sary Shagan? On the west bank of Lake Balkhash, in the desert of what is now Kazakhstan, the Soviet Council of Ministers authorized, in August of 1956, an experimental facility for missile defense. Not offense, defense. The problem the Kremlin was trying to solve was the hardest one in the nuclear age. How do you shoot down an incoming warhead, a target the size of a person, falling out of space at 20 times the speed of sound? They built a proving ground the length of a country to try. And on the 4th of March 1961, at that range, the Soviets did something the United States would not manage for years. They intercepted a ballistic missile warhead in flight with a non-nuclear hit. The first time in history anyone had done it. Sary Shagan was where the Soviet Union learned to knock arrows out of the air. It stayed a closed city, sealed to outsiders, until 2005. The place was the length of a small country, some 480 kilometers of instrumented desert, so an interceptor could be watched across its whole flight. And the report anchors the source inside it with the granular, boring, verifiable stuff real espionage is actually made of. It names a regional headquarters he calls Veach 03080 and his own outfit, a warhead checkout unit, Veach 03142. Unit numbers, not the language of a man inventing a UFO story. Our source worked inside that, and what makes his debrief worth the CIA's ink is that the technical parts check out. He is not a farmer who saw a light. He is a man who handled the ordnance. Listen to paragraph 10 and 11 in the report's own words.
Besides the System 75 warheads, Site 4 also checked the warheads for a missile known as the System 300 and/or Alden. The System 300 Alden warheads, after being checked at Site 4, were taken to Site 35 for launching. According to rumor, the missile was for anti-missile defense.
Two weapons, named in the source's own shorthand, System 75 and System 300, or Alden. The CIA officer adds a translation in brackets, a field comment, and this is where the raw report earns its keep.
Field comment. Source identified the System 300 Aldan missile in available reference material as the ABM-1 Galosh.
Now those names mean something, and they are checkable against the open historical record. System 75 is the SC-75 Divina. NATO called it the SA-2 guideline. It is not obscure. It is the most famous surface-to-air missile of the Cold War. The SA-2 is the weapon that reached up over the Urals on the 1st of May, 1960, and knocked Francis Gary Powers and his U-2 spy plane out of the sky and handed Nikita Khrushchev the propaganda victory of the decade. That is System 75. And the other one, the ABM-1 Galosh, is the crown jewel. Galosh is the Western name for the A-350, the tall exoatmospheric interceptor of the A-35 system, the ring of anti-missile rockets built to defend Moscow itself. It was the one and only anti-ballistic missile system the Soviets were permitted to keep under the 1972 ABM Treaty. In other words, our source was handling the warheads for the missiles that guarded the Kremlin from nuclear attack, and he describes them with the specificity of a man who did the work. The Galosh warhead, about 2 meters long, 80 to 100 centimeters across, roughly 400 kilograms, packed with black cassettes, 45 by 12 centimeters, and inside them, metal balls. In his Russian, shariki. The System's 75 warhead, about 100 grey cassettes, each holding 200 to 300 balls, no bigger than 1.5 centimeters. This is not the vocabulary of a hoaxer. This is a technician emptying his memory onto a table in a safe house. And the metal balls are not trivia. They are the whole idea. To kill an incoming warhead, you do not need a perfect hit. You need to throw a wall of shrapnel into its path at a closing speed no armor survives. Hundreds of little steel balls, shariki, a shotgun blast fired at the edge of space. That is what those cassettes were for. The man understood the weapon from the inside. There is one honest wrinkle, and we will not paper over it. The known Galosh carried a nuclear warhead, a large one. Our source describes a conventional cluster of metal balls, and the field comment records his own limit.
Field comment. Source had no knowledge regarding nuclear warheads. He stated all work done by his department was basically experimental.
Experimental. In his word, opitnaya. So either he worked a test variant or his identification of the missile was imperfect. The officer even notes the source could not say whether Aldan and System 300 were the same missile or two cousins. We flag it, we do not resolve it, and we move on. Because it is exactly this texture, the technician who knows the bolt sizes but not the bomb, that tells you the green circle witness was a real, placed, credible human being. Which is what makes the next two paragraphs so interesting. Paragraph 13 is 1 sentence long, and it is the reason this case has teeth. After all the warhead detail, the source drops a rumor, and the CIA writes it down exactly as hearsay.
According to hearsay, experiments involving laser weapons were being conducted at an unknown location at the range. Supposedly, the tests involved powerful antennas. No further details.
Laser weapons, powerful antennas, at Sary Shagan. Now, here is where a lesser channel sprints straight to a death ray shooting down a UFO, and here is where we slow all the way down, because the truth is both real and more disciplined than the legend. Was there directed energy work at Sary Shagan? Yes. That part is not rumor, it is history. The range was the home of the Soviet Union's laser weapon program, the complex the West came to call Terror 3. Soviet work on laser weapons began in the mid-1960s, and construction of the beam site at the range was underway around the time of the 1972 ABM Treaty, which is precisely the window our source is describing. A man on that range in 1972 and 73, hearing that they were testing beam weapons with big antennas, was hearing something that lines up with the real program. That collocation, a genuine directed energy site and a genuine strange light, is the whole reason this document is more than a footnote. And understand the stakes of that rumor in 1977. Both superpowers were terrified the other would crack directed energy first, the fear that would erupt a few years later into Ronald Reagan's Strategic Defense Initiative, the Star Wars dream of shooting missiles out of the sky with beams. A Soviet laser range was one of the hottest intelligence targets on the planet, which means a technician's second-hand line about powerful antennas landed on desks that were desperate for it to be real. That is the gravitational pull this document sits in, and it is exactly why we have to read it coldly. But now the cold water, because credibility is the only currency we have. The Terra 3 legend got enormous. The most famous story is that in October of 1984, the site's laser reached up and illuminated the Space Shuttle Challenger, jamming its instruments and rattling the crew.
That claim originated with former Soviet officials. The Challenger crew and knowledgeable members of the U.S. intelligence community denied that the shuttle was ever illuminated by the laser.
Denied by the people who were on board. Treat the Challenger story as what it is, a disputed Cold War legend, not a fact. And the reality of the weapon was smaller still. When American experts were finally let onto the site in 1989, they found a system that had never come anywhere near operational. Lasers on the order of 1,000 times weaker than America's own big laser of the era. The Soviet death ray was in the end mostly a rumor with a construction budget. So hold both things at once, because that is the honest posture. The range really was testing beams, and those beams could not have painted a growing green ring across the evening sky. The document, to its enormous credit, never claims they did. Paragraph 13 is a rumor about lasers. Paragraph 14 is a sighting, and the CIA reporting officer puts a blank line between them and draws no arrow from one to the other. We are going to honor that blank line, even though it is the most tempting thing in the file. So here it is. Paragraph 14. The last readable thing in the document before the page goes black. Read it slowly. The restraint in the language is the point. It begins at the bottom of one page.
On one evening in late summer, 1973, source observed an unidentified phenomenon at Site 7. While watching a sport competition between Canada and the USSR on television, he stepped outside for some air and observed an unidentified, sharp, bright, green circular object or mass in the sky. The object was situated west of the site at an angle of sighting of approximately 70 degrees. The altitude of the object was undeterminable.
Stop there for a second. A man steps out of a room where a hockey game between Canada and the Soviet Union is on the television. He looks up and to the west, about 70 degrees off the horizon, high, nearly overhead, and he sees a sharp, bright, green circle. Not a saucer, not lights in formation, a circle, a mass. The officer's bracket tells you how carefully the man hedged.
Field comment. Although there were no clouds in the sky that evening, source believed that the green mass would have been higher than cloud level. Source could not estimate the diameter of the object.
He will not guess the size. He will not guess the height, except to say it was above, where clouds would be. This is a man refusing to embellish. And then the thing does the one thing that makes this case memorable.
Within 10 to 15 seconds of observation, the green circle widened, and within a brief period of time, several green concentric circles formed around the mass. Within minutes, the coloring disappeared. There was no sound, such as an explosion, associated with the phenomenon.
The circle widens. Rings form around it, concentric, one inside the next, like the ripples from a stone dropped in a pond, but in the sky and green. And then, over minutes, the color simply drains away, silent. No boom, no rush of air, no light trail. Just an expanding green target that opened, bloomed into rings, and faded. And the last bracket in the file is the most important sentence in it, because of what the witness refuses to do.
Field comment. Source had no opinion as to what this phenomenon was. There was no resultant rumors. Source could not provide any further details.
No opinion. He does not say spacecraft. He does not say weapon. He does not say ours or theirs. He describes a shape and a color and a duration, and he stops. And nobody on the base, as far as he knew, ever talked about it again. No resultant rumors. That is the entire sighting. One man, one evening, one green circle that grew rings and went out. There is one thread that begs to be pulled, and honesty demands we admit where it snaps. He anchors the evening to a Canada versus USSR sport competition on television. The kind of detail a historian dreams of, because you could, in theory, look up the broadcast and fix the date. Except the famous Canada-Soviet hockey series were 1972 and 1974, not the summer of 73. So the anchor that looks like it should pin the date doesn't. We cannot tell you the night this happened. We can only tell you the document says late summer 73 and leave the whole honest and open. Now the skeptic's corner. And on this case, the skeptic is holding most of the cards. Because we have to ask the unglamorous question, what that we already understand expands into silent green concentric rings high in the evening sky and then fades? It turns out we have a very good answer, and you have probably seen it yourself in the last few years.
A rocket? Specifically, a rocket venting or dumping fuel at high altitude. When a stage releases unburned propellant into the near vacuum up there, it flash freezes into a cloud of tiny ice crystals, and those crystals catch sunlight the ground has already lost. If the stage is spinning, the cloud opens outward in rings or a spiral. It is enormous, it is eerie, it is completely silent, because it is happening tens of kilometers above you, and it fades as the geometry of the sunlight changes. Every few months, some version of this lights up social media as a UFO, and every few months it turns out to be a Falcon 9 or a military launch dumping fuel.
An expanding, silent, luminous ring that fades in minutes is today one of the most reliably identified things in the sky, and it is a rocket. And now remember two facts from earlier in this very document. Our source was standing on an active missile range. The report says warheads checked at Site 4 were taken to Site 35, quote, for launching. Things went up from Sary Shagan. A test launch, a booster venting, an intercept trial, gone high and bright. Every one of those is a mundane, local, terrestrial candidate sitting right there in the same 3 pages. And if you want the clincher, look at what else was happening in the Soviet Union in the very year this report was filed.
On the 20th of September, 1977, people across the northwest of the Soviet Union and as far away as Finland watched an enormous glowing object hang over the city of Petrozavodsk, trailing shafts of light like a jellyfish. It became one of the most famous UFO events in Soviet history. And it has a well-supported explanation. That same morning, the USSR launched the Cosmos 955 satellite from the Plesetsk Cosmodrome. The rising rocket, its exhaust lit by a sun still below the horizon, produced the glowing, expanding, silent shape that terrified a nation.
Same country, same decade, a luminous, expanding, silent mass in the sky, and underneath it, a rocket. Now, to be fair to the file, Petrozavodsk is a separate case. It is not in our CIA document, and we are not smuggling it in as if it were. We raise it because it is the pattern, the well-documented physics-first pattern that any serious investigator has to lay over a green expanding ring before reaching for anything exotic. And the intelligence world knew this pattern cold. This is the same CIA that back in 1953 convened the Robertson Panel and concluded most UFO reports were misidentified ordinary things. The same agency whose own historian later admitted that more than half of the UFO reports of the late 50s and 60s were actually its own secret U-2 and Oxcart spy planes, catching the sun at altitudes the public did not know anything could reach. When the CIA files a strange light, its institutional reflex is not aliens. It is, what secret thing of ours, or theirs, did this person actually see? A quick word on the color, because people fixate on it. Green is the least mysterious color in the night sky. It is the classic color of a bright meteor and of high-altitude airglow. What green does not usually do on its own is open into neat, concentric, expanding rings. And that ringing, silent geometry is the fingerprint of a spinning stage, venting into vacuum far more than it is a rock burning up. And one honest caution about the witness: this is a single memory of a few minutes on one evening, recounted sometime later to whoever debriefed him. Human memory of a brief, startling light in the dark is among the softest evidence there is, not because the man is lying, but because that is simply how memory works. So weigh the green circle honestly. One witness, no second observer, no photograph, no instrument reading, no radar, no follow-up, no rumor, no confirmation. The man himself offered no opinion. On every scale we use on this channel, that is weak evidence. The most likely explanations are entirely of this earth, and several of them are launching from the range he was standing on. That is the responsible read, and we are not going to flinch from it to keep the mystery warm. There is one more thing worth knowing before we close the file, and it reframes the whole case. The green circle was not the only Soviet UFO report the CIA was keeping. In the same 2026 releases that gave us this document sit others, and you can read their titles in the public index.
One is called Report on Conversations with Soviet Scientists on the Subject of Unidentified Flying Objects in the USSR. Another is titled simply The Sary Shagan Weapons Testing Range. Another, Report of Unusual Flying Object Sightings and Attendant Scientific Activity.
We have not read the insides of those files, so we will not pretend to quote them. But their titles alone tell you something true. The agency was systematically collecting UFO reporting out of the Soviet Union, and more than one of those files circles back to this exact range. And the reason is not that Langley believed in flying saucers. It is the opposite. For an intelligence service, a strange light over an enemy weapons range is not a mystery. It is a lead. It might be a new Soviet missile. It might be a directed energy test. It might be an atmospheric effect that would fool your own pilots and your own radar. The UFO question for the CIA was always a mask over the real question. What does the other side have that we do not? That is why a green circle rides, uncomplaining, inside a report about warheads. It was filed not as wonder, but as work. So let us put it on the record, in order the way the file earns it.
1956. The Soviet Union authorizes the Sary Shagan missile defense range on Lake Balkhash. 1960. An SA-2 from that program downs Gary Powers' U-2. 1961. Sary Shagan achieves the world's first non-nuclear intercept of a ballistic missile warhead. 1972. The ABM Treaty. Construction of the range's laser site is underway. 1972 to 73, our source serves on the range, handling SA-2 and Galosh warheads. Late summer 1973, one evening at Site 7, the Green Circle. December 1977, the CIA distributes the report. That same autumn, the Petrozavodsk jellyfish lights up the Soviet sky over a rocket launch. 1978, the report first surfaces publicly, almost entirely redacted. 1984, the disputed and denied Challenger laser story. 1989, U.S. inspectors find the Sary Shagan laser was never near operational. 2019, a declassification request pries loose a fuller copy. 2026, the Department of War releases the fullest version yet.
So, what do we actually know? We know this is a genuine CIA intelligence report, distributed across the U.S. government in 1977 and released in full in 2026. We know the source was a real, technically credible insider on the Soviet Union's most secret missile range. His warhead detail checks out against the open record. We know the range truly was a directed energy test site, and we know the dramatic laser legends attached to it were disputed and, on inspection, overblown. And we know that one evening in late summer 1973, that credible man saw a bright green circle grow concentric rings in silence and fade, and told the truth about how little he could say about it. What we do not know is what it was. We do not know the date, because the one clue points at the wrong year. We do not know whether anything went up from Site 35 that night. We cannot rule the mundane in, and we will not rule the mysterious out, and we do not know what sat under the censor's black rectangle in paragraphs 1 through 9 and 12. The operational context that might have explained everything or nothing, still withheld half a century later. The green circle isn't proof of anything from anywhere else. It is a well-attested description of a well-known kind of sky event, seen by an honest witness who refused to overclaim, filed by an agency that refused to conclude inside a document it stamped as not yet evaluated. Unresolved is not the same word as unexplained, and it is a very long way from confirmed. In the end, the most impressive thing in this file isn't the green circle, it's the discipline around it. A defector who wouldn't guess the size, a case officer who wrote hearsay down as hearsay and drew no arrow to the light, an agency that filed it as raw, unevaluated, and left the black boxes black. Everyone who touched this document told you exactly how much they didn't know. We're just going to do the same. A bright green ring over the Soviet Union's shield against the end of the world, real, recorded, and still, honestly, unresolved. Case file 009. The green circle over Sary Shagan. Every page read, every claim checked against the record by an autonomous AI investigation. The UAP Herald, declassified, investigated, filed,